Okay, hey everybody. First of all, I'd like to say thanks for sticking out this far into the workshop content. It was a lot of fun to make. I kind of blasted through it all in one night. It was really cool. But I think I'll just make some additional content to just continue the process here. So this video is going to be about error handling, whether it's an error in the JSON or whether there is an error from the API. So what's interesting is that right now we only call the beers API. So of course it's quite a lot of data. Now I'm just going to change this to be a bit smaller. So 5 items for 5 beers on the first page, pretty straightforward. Now an error may look like this. So we've got status code 400, bad request. It's invalid, and that's okay. Now, what I would like to do is just show you something about the Punk API. So I'm going to use example 1 here, and I'm going to create an error. I'm going to say page 0 first of all. I'm going to save this here, and also compile it when it's saved. Oh, beers element at. Oh, we did actually change this, didn't we? Beers at is what we changed it to. I think it was beers at, wasn't it? And then beer string at, I believe, is what we changed that to. Okay, so that's our updated example. Now, of course, this is going to error out because, as we know, page 0 doesn't exist. It must be greater than 0, and that's cool. So we just need to show you. I need to show you what that looks like in the actual green screen. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my Punk API here. And then I'm just going to call example 1. That was our example. Now, of course, it's not going to do anything. So if I do a start debug example 1, and let's go ahead and set the breakpoint on the get. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. So if I set the breakpoint on the beers get, and then let's call it again. Okay, so here's our first item. Let's jump into that here. There's our API, our parameters. So here's the page, and then the per page. And here's what our URL looks like. Actually, it's exactly the same. Isn't that wonderful? So let's run that. Now, the response is interesting because it's blank. Now, this is a bit of an issue with the HTTP GET clob. So if we actually look at the job log here, we actually, oh, I scrolled too far. We actually see here server return HTTP response code 400. And the sad part about this is when it doesn't return a 200, it doesn't give us the JSON. So we don't actually know where it went wrong. But what we can, check is, of course, the SQL code, or the SQL state even. So we get 3800 for the SQL state when it's errored, and minus 4302. Not that that one is necessarily important to us. But what we're going to do is just make it valid. So let's say page 1, save it. When it's saved, we'll recompile. I don't know why this box is so slow. Let's recompile here. And let's go ahead and, start the debug again. And we'll put the breakpoint on. And we'll call example 1. So here it is. Let's jump in. Sorry, that's my phone going off. I probably should have put it on silent. Set the breakpoint. Call it. And that's, of course, a good response. Now, let's also have a look at the SQL state here. We get all zeros. That means it was good. Pretty straightforward stuff, I would say. And what we're going to do is simply make a new, variable here that checks, whether the SQL state is all zeros, whether it was successful or not. So, and we won't put it at the bottom. We'll put it, let's say, right below the get API. So, Duckle procedure. In fact, let's come out of our debug here. Procedure, beers error. Let's do beers successful instead. And I'll show you why in a minute. So there's, oh, I scrolled down. So there's our biz successful. And of course it needs to be export. And all we're going to do is to do a double PI, biz successful, and it's going to return an indicator and PI. Return SQL state equals all zeros. Of course we could use star zeros as well, but I personally don't like to do that. So that's that. And then of course we need to make the prototype for it, so we can go ahead and open up the Punk API RPGLEH, and of course fairly simple. I'm just going to copy it from here, drop it in after the get. There's my ind, of course ext proc, change the PI to PR, save. And now what we'll do is actually include the use of this API. Of course, now that we've created it, we do need to recompile our service program and of course update it too. Luckily, we can just do that in a couple of clicks now. And then we can say if, but this is after the count, it needs to be before the count, sorry. I'm going to say if biz successful, like so, end if. And we'll just always close, just in case, you know. We'll always close. And of course, let's do an else. Let's just say, you know, display, there was an error. Save. Cool, well, let's recompile that. The system all of a sudden has gotten a little bit faster, which is cool. And maybe what we'll do for the sake of this is we'll actually add a PI for the program. Example 1, end PI. And for this, we'll just say, let's say p page. We'll make it just a character 2. And of course, because the page is actually a numeric, we'll just do this. Page int 5. And we'll just say page equals int p page. Of course, it could have been zoned, but character conversion and all that stuff, it's just much easier this way. So now we can just pass in the page as a variable to really test it, make it much easier for us. Let's compile that. Oh, page is a reserved name. That's okay. Let's call it page num instead. Okay, so let's compile that. So let's just call it. Let's just call our example. So call example 1, and then we'll say, let's say page 1. Okay, that worked. It was very fast, but it did work. There's our 5 items. Now let's call it again, but with 0. Oh. There was an error. So we can tell now in our program if there is an error calling the API or not. Now, of course, it's a very basic error handler, and that's just because of the limitation of the HTTP GET CLOB. What I would have liked is if the HTTP GET CLOB actually returned the JSON, even if it was a 400, we could pass this and get the information like the message from it, the data, so on and so forth. So that's just some very basic error handling that we can do in our service program. And cool. See you in the next video.